Scott Pilgrim, a name many know as a graphic novel series and a movie, but for me, I didn't know anything about the comics until last year. I remember watching Scott Pilgrim vs. the World for the first time and loving everything about it. The music, the comic book style animations, the weird humor, and of course the ridiculous plot. But when I randomly found out about the graphic novels, I quickly discovered that they were written by a Canadian, which being a Canadian myself immediately impresses and intrigues me, and makes so much sense given that the movie was set in Toronto. I'm not one to cover the entire plot of something. Also, it's been out for a long enough time that I'm sure anyone watching this has read the book, seen the movie, or at least heard of either. But for those of you who don't know and want a quick summary, the main character Scott starts to like this girl named Ramona, who has these 7 exes that have been recruited into this League of Evil Exes by the Uber Evil X. And somehow through the power of comics, Scott has these superior fighting skills that allow him to fight these exes in unrealistically awesome ways. There's obviously way more to the story than just that, but that's the main plot. The author Brian Lee O'Malley grew up in the London, Ontario area, which for those of you who don't know is only a couple hours away from Toronto, and is only 20 minutes away from where I live. I don't know what it is about knowing about someone that's famous/successful who's from somewhat near you that's so intriguing, especially when you don't even know them personally, but what I think it is for me is feeling that greatness can be found anywhere, even in smaller places in the world. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is one of the main reasons I got interested in and eventually bought all the Scott Pilgrim books is because the author is from Canada. I'm also somewhat of a wannabe successful person myself, so when I hear about someone like Brian, I think, wow, if he could do it, maybe I could do it too. Because even though it might sound lame, to me, knowing that one of the most popular comics was created in my general area inspires me and makes me feel like anything is possible. The thing about Scott Pilgrim books that also inspires me, and I genuinely love, is the art style. A style that looks fairly simple, with very cartoon looking characters, and even just printed in black and white for the first editions of the book. Is something that says to me that these graphic novels and works of art don't always have to be these incredibly detailed things. If you have the right idea, passion, and style, it can be done any way you want. This awesome Canadian series was started in 2004, but even before that, Brian had worked with the publishing company for Scott Pilgrim, Oni Press, I hope I said that right, on titles like Hopeless Savages and lettering a bunch of comics, and his first graphic novel, Lost at Sea. After doing all this work, Brian later got inspired by the Canadian song Scott Pilgrim by Plumtree to start working on the Scott Pilgrim books. The song, mixed with his love of shonen-style manga comics, kickstarted his desire to create the series. When publishing the first editions of Scott Pilgrim, they were in black and white, something I used to think took away from comics, but after reading the Walking Dead series, I realized how colored or not, it doesn't matter as long as the story is captivating, and the art style is able to convey the story without the use of detailed color. That being said, I did purchase all the colored versions because they look so amazing. Brian said that the reason he didn't publish in color was because of the cost. When he first started comics, like most humble creatives, he didn't even think they were going to sell that well. And even when the series did start to sell, Brian said that it was gradual and not all at once. But a fan base definitely grew. A comic series that was started in 2004 and ended in 2010 captivated fans for years and still does to this day, myself being an example. The books were re-released with colored versions in 2012. The colors done by Nathan Fairbairn, another Canadian creative who lives in British Columbia. Nathan and Brian would actually collaborate again with Brian's other series, Seconds. I know I said earlier that there should be a definite appreciation for black and white comics, but as true as that is, you also have to appreciate when color makes an already amazing comic even more amazing. Before I bought them, I would pass by the Scott Pilgrim books in the bookstore, and I would always be drawn in by the colors, even just on the front cover. They work so well with the simplistic art style, and even add a deeper layer to O'Malley's drawings. The art is obviously awesome. I feel like I could talk about it forever. I don't know what it is about it, but I love it. Often I'm more impressed by art styles that aren't realistic and extremely detailed. Because as talented as it is to be able to capture realism in a piece of art, there's also something to be said about the ability to create your own art style that is unique, whether it's cartoony, simplistic, or whatever. I also think it's easier to appreciate something not so realistic because I personally find that I don't judge it as much. If something's trying to look lifelike, I'll find myself subconsciously looking for imperfections, and it can take away from the simple appreciation. Maybe that's just me being picky, but I really like stuff that's different from the norm, like Scott Pilgrim, or Hellboy, or even games like Borderlands and people on YouTube like Casey Golden, for their personal styles that are all so different but impressive to me. But aside from the art of Scott Pilgrim, the story is what kept me so obsessed and continuing to buy each of the volumes one after another. When it comes to comics, I love the idea of them and will often buy way too many but end up not reading some for months. Sometimes I'll buy one and only read some of it, getting bored and not finishing it for a while. I've even lost interest in reading superhero stories almost altogether, because I found the writing to be kind of weak in a lot of stories. which to be fair, it can be said that superhero stories are more geared for younger audiences anyways. So I started to read more adult comics like The Walking Dead, Why the Last Man, Saga, and other comics that are very story driven. Art can grab your attention right away and persuade you to buy that comic, video game, or whatever, but what usually keeps you around is the story. The story is the heart of most of entertainment mediums. Without a good story, it's hard to keep the attention of someone. You can have all the fancy visuals you want, but without an interesting story, all you have are the fancy visuals, which are fine to appreciate, but to keep someone coming back for more and to really create a compelling world, you need story. Sometimes art can be better than the story or vice versa. You might find that you bought something because it looked amazing, but the writing didn't match it. Or the writing was really well done, but the art style wasn't. But in the case of Scott Pilgrim, to me both the art and story are incredible, and are able to complement each other so well. The writing is honestly so weird. I feel like that's the best way I can describe it, but it's a good weird. It's a very sporadic, outrageous, younger person kind of humor style of writing that made me confused but also entertained the entire time. There were times where I was reading and after turning the page I would have to double check that I only turned one page and not more, because sometimes the difference between one page would be an entire scene or story change that seems so sudden but really is just one of the cool quirks of the books. Then there's the whole Scott can somehow obliterate people with his fighting skills while also being an extremely lazy person at the same time. Something that seems again so weird and confusing, but really is just part of what makes this series great. There is some realness to the story too. Behind all the over-the-top action scenes and storyline, there is some stuff about love, relationships, growing up, being on your own for the first time, having to get a job, and even dealing with your past. The other thing I love about these books, and probably appreciate even more after watching the movie first, is the amount of backstory you get for Scott, like his relationship with Kim when he was younger, his old friend Lisa, and even more about his ex, Envy. All this detail adds so much to the already great story, whether you watch the movie or not. There's all this realness and character development. There's really creative and silly humor. And there's even epic comic book action. It really does have it all in my opinion. There haven't been that many graphic novels that have made me want to read the entire thing in one sitting and immediately get the next book. But Scott Pilgrim was definitely one of them. It's even something I'd reread several times because they're that worthwhile. A story like this is something so original, which I think makes me like it most of all. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that I'm so impressed by someone Canadian that grew up in an area near me, just a regular guy, being able to create something so iconic that has lasted and continued to gain popularity over all these years. It really just goes to show that if you're passionate enough about something, and obviously have a small amount of talent, that you're able to do things like Brian Lee O'Malley and do or create something amazing. I mostly just wanted to make this video because I obviously love the series, but I really want others to be able to experience these books too if they haven't already. I also want to talk to others who love it just as much as I do, and as a fellow aspiring creative, I want to encourage others to keep their dream alive, whatever it may be, and to look for and embrace inspiration in the little things. So if you've never read Scott Pilgrim before, and you're even slightly interested, I highly recommend it. And if you're a fan of the series or movie, I hope you found what I said somewhat relatable, and I would love to hear your feelings about the series too.